You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Air Raid Hour, Victory Monday Air Raid Hour tonight. I'm your host for the evening, David Tilton at Tilt Money on Twitter, and joined by social media legend at Uber Hansen on Twitter, Hansel of Reddit fame, of Twitter fame. Hansel, welcome tonight to a Victory Monday show of the Air Raid Hour. Judge doing adulting things, but he will be back for our next Monday show. And first, I want to thank you for, of course, filling in again for Judge on tonight's show. We have obviously a fun one tonight, recapping the Bills' big win over the Chiefs. But first and foremost, how are you doing tonight? In comment section, how are you feeling tonight on a Victory Monday?
Yeah, I mean, when you reached out to me to hop on the show, it would have been a lot easier to say no if the Bills had lost. But lucky for me and the show itself, I guess, they won. I'm absolutely elated because going into that game, I saw it going, it could have gone either way and I wouldn't have been surprised. And so for the Bills to pull it out in the fashion they pulled it out, and it just was, it's everything I wanted basically to happen yesterday. So really, really doing very well right now.
That's great. And this is a great comment by Carolina Frank. And Carolina Frank, where are you in the Carolinas? I'm curious. I am in North Carolina myself. So so put that there in the comment section. Where are you from in North Carolina? Or you might be South Carolina. I could be wrong. But let's start out just before we get into like the main parts of the game. Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. That was obviously the big narrative coming into this game, and a lot of the talk, and Steve and I talked about this in the pregame, was like, how you want to rank these guys. Like that stuff, I don't really get into it too much. I saw you had some good tweets on social media as well. It's like, why bother ranking these guys? Like they're in a tier of their own. Aaron Quinn always, makes that good point of like tiering type rankings is really the way to go in these types of situations. These guys are in a tier of their own, atop the NFL. Josh Allen, 27 for 40 for 329 yards, 3 touchdowns, another 12 carries for 32, 9 for 9 to close out the game with the hurdle, the touchdown to Knox. Everything Colin Cowherd and Fox Sports said he was incapable of doing, he proved that he could do. Mahomes, look, he was great too. 25 for 40, 338, the 2 TDs, the 2 picks, 1 in the red zone and 1 to end the game. So we'll start out, and this is going to be kind of a little bit of the theme for the show tonight. We're going to be doing a little fact or fiction throughout the show tonight. So comment section, chime in as well. Fact or fiction, what you think on some of these topics that we are going to throw out there tonight. Fact or fiction, and this is a little bit more of a nuanced statement than maybe what you've seen on social media. Patrick Mahomes has the better legacy right now, but on the field, Josh Allen is a superior quarterback right now. Fact or fiction?
Yeah, I think that's a fact. Both statements are a fact, right? I don't really think there's any debating that Patrick Mahomes has the better legacy right now. He has the Super Bowl. He has the MVP. 2 things Allen surely does not have. Hopefully he will get this year. But when it comes to their level of play right now, and I'm saying this knowing there's razor thin margins. Like the difference between Mahomes and Allen is so thin, it's almost not even worth picking who's the better one. But I think Allen played better last night, and I think Allen's been playing better this year. So for that reason, I say right now, Allen is the better quarterback, but Patrick Mahomes undoubtedly has the better legacy right now.
Yeah, and it seems like fairly unanimous in the comment section. We got Josh Clark saying fact, Pops Mafia fact, Randy Hardman's in there saying fact. And I think that's totally fair, right? Like you can say that Patrick Mahomes has the better legacy right now while acknowledging that Josh Allen on the field in 2022 is the best player in the NFL right now. And I think that's a fairly objective statement to make right now. Like Patrick Mahomes does have some of those accolades behind him with the MVP and the Super Bowl, and Josh still is aspiring to get there. If and when he gets there, that will take him into a whole other stratosphere that we're going to be talking about even when that happens. But it is it is an objective statement, I think, to say that he is playing better right now on the field in 2022. And this is an interesting question from Randy. Question is, when Josh does pull even, maybe from a legacy front, which he will, how far do the goalposts move? I don't even want to. I mean, it's a great question. I'm sure the goalposts will move. It's always a narrative question or framing when it comes to this, much like, people say you can kind of frame statistics however you want to kind of make them fit your narrative. I think there will be obviously narratives being drawn to kind of fit and support both sides, which, let's be real, we hate Nick Wright, right? Like, he came on and was like talking about how like this game doesn't matter and this and that because it wasn't in the playoffs. And I will say, Bills Mafia, if that happened the other way and the Bills lost that game yesterday, we probably would have been saying a very similar thing, that like, hey, it's all good. It doesn't matter in the long run, big picture, because what's going to matter is what the Bills do in the playoffs against this team, assuming they're on a collision course again. So that's something that I think we can probably, look ourselves in the mirror and say we probably would have done the same thing. But yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. These two are in a level of their own right now.
Yeah, and I think that point, right, the game yesterday, and I was trying to say it all week on Twitter, maybe as a way to just prepare myself in the event that the Bills could have possibly lost that game, was if the Bills lose the game, the season's not over. All it means is we likely have to go to Arrowhead in January. If the Bills win the game, I really do believe now the Bills have kind of cemented themselves as this is our number one seed to lose. And I think that is gigantic. Like, Patrick Mahomes I don't believe has ever played an away playoff game in his career. And that's unbelievable. So seeing him on the road, especially in Buffalo with that fan base and the visceral nature of what would happen in that game, I'd like to see Mahomes have to deal with the crowd noise there. And we saw it last night with Allen. Allen was constantly on his helmet, like going to the ears and stuff. Like, I can't hear, trying to move people around, and it affected the game. So I think in that sense, this game meant a lot. But if the Bills had lost it, I wouldn't have come on here today and said, the season's over. Like, we can't beat the Chiefs. It's one of 17 games. That's all it is.
It's one of 17 games. And speaking of 17 games, Von in the number 17, obviously Josh number 17, Von Miller with his 2 sacks yesterday puts him at 6 sacks through 6 games, meaning he is on pace for 17 sacks this season, essentially doubling his total from last year where he had 9.5. 2 sacks and 9 pressures against Kansas City. We said it in the summer. Everyone else has said it. It's not a super it's not an earth-shattering take and description to say that he's a closer, and that's why we brought him in. A lot of folks were saying that. We said that. Many people have said that. He's a big-time player that's making big-time plays in big games, and he shined in the biggest moments of this game. At the end of the half, he gets that sack to give us the ball. After some questionable officiating, obviously we're going to get into that. We score 7. The pressure that he brought led to a fourth quarter field goal for the Chiefs, as opposed to them going for the touchdown. A sack led to a fourth quarter punt. Pressure despite double teams, and it led to Milano's sort of pressure and the Taron Johnson game-sealing interception. Von Miller, we called it in the pregame, the take me higher player of the game for yesterday, and he was that and more. So talk a little bit about Von Miller and your thoughts on him in this game.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, everyone's talked about him as the closer. And that sack, I think in the fourth quarter, his second sack was basically decided the game, kept the Bills in it, and allowed them to eventually really win the game. Von's everything that we thought he'd be for the Bills, if not more. Like, I don't know if I thought he'd have 6 sacks through 6 games on pace for 17. Like, that's a massive number. But he just has this like aura about him when he's on the field too. And the teams have to respect him. Like, the Chiefs had to put a running back on the side or a tight end on the side at time to use 2 players to block him. That affects the entire defense, makes it easier on the linebackers and the other rushers. One play that kind of went without talking about because of the 2 sacks, and I think you kind of brought it up, was it was 3rd and 13. Mahomes evades, the sacks and pressure, and is running. He would have got a first down, in my opinion. And Von chases him down behind and basically by his shoestring pulls him down. It's not a sack. It's just a tackle. but that tackle was just as big as any of the other 2 sacks he had. Von's everything I thought he or wanted him to be. It's incredible.
And I love this comment from Spin here. He says, how big was it just for Von to have a big game, especially against the Chiefs? Because that is the main justification for getting Von in his contract.
Oh, yeah.
You brought him in here for big time games, and he's played on the biggest of stages in his career. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's made countless big time plays for the Broncos over his career. And it was just a bit of vindication in knowing that he had that type of game against that team and in such an important game heading into the Bills bye week. I mean, you can't say enough about that. AXGen Jax N 2022 says having Vaughn in there and then having the commit a chipper helps all the numbers on the back end, worth every penny. And really, this had been the missing piece to the Bills defensive line for the last 3 years. Now they've had, essentially a different looking defensive line each of the past 3 years. Jerry Hughes was the guy there. There was so much talk about like Jerry can get pressures. That's great. His sack numbers weren't there. His analytics were still pretty solid. The Bills kind of retooled the interior of the defensive line too, each of the last 3 years. But we know they were in on guys like JJ Watt. We knew there were rumors about the Bills going in on guys like Chandler Jones. They obviously invested in the draft in Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham because they knew they needed to find a spark there on the edge. And they finally just found it in a lottery ticket in a way with Von Miller, and the fact that I don't think anyone really expected the Bills to make that big of a splash in the offseason, and they did, and they are going for it this year, and they are swinging for it this year by signing Von Miller.
Yeah, and you brought up like they've been looking for this player for years or needing this kind of spark or this asset on the defense. I honestly believe if they had a player like Von Miller in that playoff game against the Chiefs, they win the game. That was the thing they were lacking. They could get pressure occasionally on Mahomes, but they just could never bring him down. And now you have a guy that does it twice in one game. Again, regular season, so we might have a very different conversation if these teams meet in the playoffs. But for Von to do that, if anything, if this team meets again, he has the fear aspect of himself now, right? Like the Chiefs know that we have to account for Von more than we did in that regular season game. And I think that could also have an impact.
Yeah, it definitely will. And speaking of the fact that was a regular season game, what clues do you think this game leaves us about a potential playoff matchup down the road? McDuffie and Gay, 2 key defenders, were missing out of the lineup for the Chiefs. The Bills scored 24 points. Okay, like there's something to be said about that. Like, I think, to me, my personal view, that's just kind of how this game went, right? The Bills left. Yeah. The Bills went 0 for twice in the red zone in this game early on, which is, obviously we had been documenting, and Romo mentioned some of the red zone struggles they'd been having, but 0 for 2 early on in the red zone, that to me, maybe not an anomaly, but you would at least expect them to come away with maybe like 6 to 10 points in that situation. And the Bills themselves were still missing guys, right, in this game. Trey White's not there. And again, in the future, we are hoping that the Bills will hopefully have home field this time around. If you look at the Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes era Bills versus Chiefs matchups, they've played 6 times already. 5 of those 6 games have been in Arrowhead. And 2 of those 6 games where they've matched up in the playoffs have both been at Arrowhead. So to your point, Mahomes never playing a road playoff game. That's a different animal. And the fact that the Bills, even though they did lose that playoff game last year, where they had, victory, defeat snatched from the jaws of victory, they showed that they could go into Arrowhead and win in a playoff game, even though at the end they didn't. And they've shown in the last really 3 times they've gone into Arrowhead that they can win. And that's 2 times in the regular season and once in the playoffs. So imagine that fast forward and the Bills actually having this game at home. It should leave us with some, like, a little bit more confidence, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and I think the home plays a gigantic portion in where my mind will be at in that game, and I think where the Bills' minds would be at in that game. I think you make a really good point. The Bills know that they can go to Arrowhead and win regular season or postseason, even though, like you said, they didn't win in the postseason. But nonetheless, they know they have the ability to do that. I just think the comfort level at home is just so massive and would have such an impact on this game. One thing I wanted to say, though, just because I've seen it kind of spewed on social media all day, Chiefs fans kind of kept saying, like, the Bills have the better secondary. Like, we were missing guys. Like, our secondary is significantly worse than theirs is. So Josh was thrown against a worse secondary. I completely disagree with that sentiment. If you look at the Chiefs secondary yesterday, right, you have three guys that are bona fide starters: L'Jarius Sneed, Juan Thornhill, and Justin Reed. I think we can all admit those three are very good football players. The Bills really only have two bona fide starters play yesterday in Taron Johnson and Jordan Poyer, who only played with one lung, apparently, which is a whole nother different topic. Outside of that, Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams were the Chiefs' other two corners, and the Bills' three corners were Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, and Khair Elam. I don't think it was this gigantic mismatch that Chiefs fans are making it out to be, where the Bills' secondary was way better. If anything, I think I can make an argument that the Chiefs had more talent in their secondary yesterday than the Bills did.
You could. I mean, I think it's definitely closer than Chiefs fans want to admit, right? Micah Hyde not being there, Trey White not being there, Christian Benford going out. You have Dane Jackson, who is, doesn't even have a full regular season's worth of starts, like games wise, under his belt, and the rookie Khair Elam, right? So DeMar Hamlin, not a ton of game experience. Like they were just right there as far as a lack of experience is concerned as well. Now we know how good the Bills defense is overall, and I think that skews the opinions a little bit, because we look at the Bills and they're like, oh, they're one of the best defenses in the league, so that means everyone on this defense is good. Well, that's not exactly true, right? I mean, they are good, but like those guys are still pretty green. It was nice to see Elam get that pick, obviously, in the red zone. So before we go any further, I have to obviously mention that we are sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. The hand-cut cup and char pepperoni that we all know and love. You can order it online. If you're out of town, you can order it and have it delivered to your house, even if you're not in the Buffalo area. Picasso'sPizza.net. As we get into our first main segment of the night, which we tend to start with, which is our game positives. And we're going to go through our game positives, and we're going to throw a little more fact or fiction at you, Hansel, and the comment section. So let's start out. We talked about Josh already, and we talked a little bit about Von Miller. So let's talk a little bit about Leslie Frazier, right? Held the Chiefs to 20 points without Trey White, without Micah Hyde, as we mentioned, a ton of banged up players. Benford going out, the green secondary, as we mentioned. They transitioned to a 3-2-6 defense late in the game, using Milano as a spy on Patrick Mahomes. They did give up some to Kelsey, but they did stymie the Chiefs' ability to score in the red zone in the fourth quarter. 3 drives for the Chiefs, a field goal, a punt, and a turnover. Had given up 7 points all season in the second half, only 10 today, which against the Chiefs, I think, is pretty damn impressive. So that's 17 points over the last 12 quarters. My question to you, we have seen Matt Rule fired. Cliff Kingsbury, Nate Hackett, Ron Rivera having pretty rough seasons. Lovie Smith as an NFL head coach in the year of the Lord 2022. What does Leslie Frazier need to do? Fact or fiction? Leslie Frazier is hired as a head coach next offseason.
Yeah, so I'm going to go fact here. I will say I do think there is an argument to why he isn't. I don't necessarily agree with it, because we've historically seen other coaches get second chances, but he was 21-32-1 with the Vikings. He only had one winning season. Other than that, the Vikings were pretty awful. But again, then you see somebody like Josh McDaniels got a second chance, and that's not really working out for the Raiders. I think that this year, though, he does finally get a chance for a couple of reasons. One, this Bills defense still looks incredible, even with the injuries that they've had. And I think that is big kudos to coaching for that, both Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott. I think the playoffs might have something to say about this. If we see another meltdown by the defense, that could kind of impact this. But more than anything, I think it's Brian Daboll going to the Giants and looking so good and instilling the culture that the Bills have. I think that's what gets Leslie Frazier a job, is his pedigree with the Buffalo Bills and what the Bills have done under him and Sean McDermott's regime.
And Jessica says Leslie needs to be 30 years younger, unfortunately. And there's some truth to that, right? I mean, like the fact is like most organizations are looking for that young up and comer, right? The guy who's the hot name, who maybe hasn't been a head coach that they can swing in and has a huge upside. What you're getting if you hire Leslie Frazier is a bit of a steadying presence, somebody that maybe is a guy akin to a Ron Rivera would have been a couple years ago when Washington hired him. Getting a second chance, like a guy like Todd Bowles, who's getting a second chance in Tampa Bay after he had a previous head coaching stint with the Jets. It's a very interesting discussion. I think he deserves to be. I kind of like Caden's comment here. I agree. Well, not necessarily that one, but this one from earlier, fiction, but he should be. And I kind of agree with that. I think that maybe sometimes teams try to find that young and up and coming guy, and it doesn't always work out. Like Cliff Kingsbury has been interesting, I'll say, in Arizona, but the one thing Leslie Frazier does have working for him, and I'll say two things about it. Obviously, the Brian Daboll leaving for the Giants and showing what kind of culture and sort of organization the Bills have built up. That helps to an extent if there's a little bit of an amnesia from his Vikings days. The other thing that I think helps him is showing what he can do when the team's not fully healthy. So in a way, I almost think that the Bills being banged up in a way is an advantage or a better chance for Leslie Frazier maybe to get a head coaching job because he's showing what he can do when guys are banged up and not at full health. So, it's interesting. I think that it really, I think, depends also like what jobs become available. Like, would Washington, let's say they fire Ron Rivera, really want to go for another same type of guy in Leslie Frazier, where they want to go the total opposite direction? Maybe the Broncos, I think a few people mentioned if Nate Hackett is one and done. They just tried a little bit of that route previously with Vic Fangio, right? Where they hired like an older defensive minded guy. So like you try to start finding the fits, and I don't know where the fits are. So we'll just have to see kind of what jobs open up. But I like Frazier getting that means that, well, that's a whole other topic. But we'll here's another kind of fact or fiction for you all, sort of based on the possible head coaching changes in the league next year. Fact or fiction: Ken Dorsey is hired as a head coach before Leslie Frazier is given a second chance as a head coach.
So this one I struggled with. So I went fiction just because I think Leslie's going to get a shot next year, and I don't know if teams will be ready to pull the trigger on Ken Dorsey. I say this because I think if you watch the Bills games, and Cover One will come out with probably way more stuff on this as the season goes along. I think it's less the play calling being incredible and more Josh Allen being an alien, as people started calling him. So I think people might want to see a couple of years of Ken Dorsey to see how he improves and changes as a play caller. And I don't think that Allen presumably winning an MVP or possibly winning an MVP really improves Dorsey's stock at all this season. But I think within the next few years, the Bills will probably have a new offensive coordinator as Ken Dorsey gets a job somewhere.
And John comes in with the super chat. Thank you, John, as always, for that. Frazier, 21-32-1 as head coach in Minnesota, as you mentioned, Hansel, from 2009 to 2012. Okay, who was his QB1? Christian Ponder. Remind me, was Ponder good as a pro? No, and he did take them to the playoffs, I believe, 1 year. So Randy says Dorsey needs more time, just like Daboll did. And the big, huge difference, I mean, Dorsey's been coaching for some years now, but Daboll had a ton of experience. He had been an offensive coordinator, multiple stints in the NFL. He had been the offensive coordinator at Bama. He had kind of worked, he obviously worked under Belichick and New England. Like, he had a ton of experience in different organizations at different levels, working around a lot of different people. And so while his prior stints as offensive coordinator, didn't necessarily go over that well until he got to the Bills, like, he struck while the iron was hot, and he had that perfect sort of match with Josh Allen that led him to where he is now. This is a proof, I think, that your first stint isn't always the end all be all of what you're going to be, right, in a position that you get. Brian Daboll's personnel, when he was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City, was not great. Comes to Buffalo, he becomes part of the culture that Sean McDermott's building. He obviously was part of the Nick Saban and Bill Belichick culture in the past. And look what he's done for the Giants. in 2022. For like the Giants team shows you how much coaching matters because that's not
100%.
a supremely talented team. Like they're a decent football team, but they're like the 2017 Bills, like reincarnated. Okay. So that shows you how much coaching matters and also shows that you might be a more successful head coach than you would be a coordinator. Obviously, he was a very successful coordinator last year, but that is going to be interesting to see what happens. I'll say that it's fiction as well. I think that my belief, I'll say right now in October, I don't think either one of them get a head coaching job next year. That's kind of where that's kind of where my odds would be at. But again, depends how many jobs come open, and we will see.
Do you
Gotta
see?
talk.
Do you
Yep. Go
see
ahead.
any trend back the other way happening here in the future? And what I mean by that is like, right, you brought up the young coaches. So you look at someone like Zach Taylor, Sean McVay. I think Matt Rule was fairly young. I might be wrong on that. Cliff Kingsbury, all these guys. There seems to be kind of some issues with all of them now. Like you look at the Rams, McVay's Rams right now. They're an absolute mess. Obviously,
Yep.
he has the Super Bowl, has 2 Super Bowls. You look at Cliff Kingsbury. The Cardinals are a disaster. Nate Hack is not that young, but even LaFleur with the Packers, they're struggling and they're ridiculously talented. So I wonder if we're going to see a shift back from this push for young coaches to a shift for old veteran coaches maybe sooner than later.
It would be interesting. Let's, who are some of the veteran coaches maybe they have gotten? I mean, Hackett's awful in Denver, obviously.
That's true too.
But like Ron Rivera comes to mind, hasn't done that great with Washington. Like there aren't that many of them out there right now. Like the old guard are fairly tenured in the jobs that they have. Like there's not a ton of like old guard type coaches who are in like positions that they haven't been in for a long time, other than maybe a guy like Ron Rivera. I'm trying to think of who else is out there. I mean, somebody can talk about it in the comment section, but like, yeah, Todd Bowles, I guess, is the other one. LS says, and that's a second stint for him, whereas he didn't even have, he had a break obviously between head coaching jobs, and that would kind of be like a similar situation as Frazier. Joseph Modafari comes in with a super chat. Thank you, Joseph. Just want to say how awesome it is to be pinned inside our own 5-yard line and know that we have the ability to drive 90 yards and score. That was a third down too, by the way, to Gabe Davis inside the 1-yard line, I believe. So that was impressive. I mean, that play changed the tide of the game. I think that like we talk about the Gabe Davis touchdown, which was obviously huge, but that play, that third down in the shadow of your own end zone, with the crowd right there on top of you and having the balls to kind of not snap it and throw it right away, but to move around a little bit in the pocket, little hesitation, and then zip it in there. I mean, man, that was impressive. Thank you, Joseph. Continuing with the positives, Matt Milano playing like an all-pro so far this year. Absolutely great game for him. Little bit of an interesting sort of, if you want to call it, missed tackle I think he had on Nicole Hardman early. It was a very weird where he just kind of let him run by him. But other than that, 2 tackles for loss, quarterback hit, had the game-winning pressure that led to Mahomes' errant throw to Taron Johnson to seal the game. Spying Mahomes in the fourth quarter changed the dynamic of the game. He's been great all year. He's been living in the backfield, making open field tackle after tackle. Are we too homerish in thinking that he's playing at an all-pro level, or is he really passing the eye test of what we're seeing? I mean, he's made more open field tackles in preventing guys from getting first downs or whatever it may be than I can think of anyone else on this team right now. So do we have our homer glasses on a bit here and thinking that he's playing at an all-pro level, or is he legit playing at that caliber level this year?
So I think there's 2 parts to my answer on that. I think without a doubt he's playing at an all-pro level. Like when you watch Matt Milano play, he's fast sideline to sideline. He's able to stuff players up the middle. If there's an open field tackle, I trust Milano to make it. He had the one in the fourth quarter, I think, on Pacheco, if I'm saying his name right. Pacheco. That was just an absolutely incredible tackle. Like that tackle is not easy for even the best linebackers in the NFL. So I would say, yeah, Matt Milano's probably in it. What I will say, though, playing at an all-pro level, so that to me says do we think Milano has a shot at winning an All-Pro award at the end of the season for being one of the best linebackers in the NFL? The answer to that is no. He will not win an All-Pro award, and it's not his fault. It's just that the All-Pro awards are so messed up. Last year's outside linebackers that won an All-Pro award were Micah Parsons and TJ Watt. They're not outside linebackers. They're edge rushers. But he's not going to have the counting stats to basically win that award, even though he's playing at the level of an All-Pro. So I don't think it's being a homer thinking that he is playing at that level, but I'm fairly confident he will not win that award.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because the Bills, I mean, you can go back as far as you want, last 15, 20 years, even the drought era when they had some good players, like, they got snubbed for Pro Bowls, snubbed for All Pro. Not that they had a ton of All Pro warranted players in the drought era, but Pro Bowl type seasons. And it was nice to finally see Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer get that recognition. But Matt Milano is playing with his hair on fire, and I absolutely love it. And he brings, Tremaine Edmonds and him have been playing great together, but Milano brings the emotional side of it too, right? Like the Bills, for as good of a defense as they are, like outside of like Jordan Phillips, who's more of a bit of a role player, they don't really have that super emotional guy on the defensive side of the ball outside of Milano that I can see, right? I mean, I'm not saying these guys are stiffs out there, but you don't see the motion that you see out of like a Josh Allen or even sometimes a Stefon Diggs when he makes a big play on offense, like Dawson Knox, right? Like Milano is that guy on defense. And so it's really nice to see that. He brings a huge amount of swagger to that defense. Continuing with the positives, the Bills' offensive line and the running game, especially in the first half. Steve and I talked on the pregame about, will the Bills show any kind of semblance of a traditional running game in this matchup? And I kind of like cynically joked, like, yeah, 6 carries for Singletary for 5 yards a carry would be nice traditional running game. But in reality, like Singletary was popping off really nice runs in the first half. I mean, got the volume. I think he had 17 carries in the game. Singletary was 17 carries for 85 yards, 5 yards a clip. Josh had another 12 for 32. Singletary was the bell cow in this game. 17 carries at the running back position. James Cook only got 2 carries in this game. This is really the first time in a while that we've seen the Bills go this direction with the running game. First time we have a leading rusher not named Josh Allen for a while. Chiefs 2 deep shell kind of, entice the Bills to keep running into those light boxes early. The second half obviously came back down to earth a bit, but thoughts on what we saw yesterday from the Bills' quote traditional running game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something a lot of fans have been calling for all season this year, and even in prior seasons. We want to see a guy get in rhythm, and the Bills finally let a running back get in rhythm by making Singletary the bell cow back yesterday. There was a point early on in the game where Singletary had been on the field for a bit, and he pointed to the sideline with just the finger one, which my presumption is he's saying, I need a breather. I need one snap. So he was off the field. He was on the field the next snap. So the fact that Singletary had the ability to do that this week, to me, signifies the Bills said to him going into this game, look, you're the guy now. You're RB1. We're running you until you need a breather. And it was great to see because Singletary was making plays. The offensive line looked better. I don't think it looked great against the run defense of the Chiefs, but Singletary was making plays in the backfield. Like his ability to make people miss in a phone booth is why he was able to produce a 5.0 yards per carry. Like he deserves more credit for that 5.0 than anybody else on the team.
Yeah, he was impressive. And again, running to the left, there was a ton of success early in the first half, and really the whole first half of him running to the left. And his ability to cut and make guys miss in small areas, like you mentioned, is really second to none. I'm not saying that James Cook can't do that, but he hasn't done it yet, and we know Singletary can. He's got some power because he's got that low center of gravity. He's not like a super powerful guy, but he's falling forward on a lot of these runs. And what I really liked and I noticed about Singletary running yesterday is he kind of did what Stefon Diggs does when he knows the play is over, right? Live to see another day. He was securing the football falling forward and just kind of being done with it. Now, he did have that one play where it was late in the game and he had the first down right in front of him, and he kind of kicked it to the outside and got stuffed. And I was like, oh no, here we go again and build short yards. But that was really the only negative I could say about Devin Singletary yesterday. I just think, yep, this is the play we're talking about here. That one play, the 2nd and 3, where he stutter stepped and could have had it. That's one where you just got to know situationally to get that first down. And I'm sure they'll talk about that in the building this week, but he'll learn from that. Overall, really a nice game from him. And it was nice to see him get a bulk of the carries, right? He can handle 15 to 17 carries a game. And honestly, that's probably the max he's ever going to get in this offense, right? In any given game. 15 carries is not, I mean, in today's NFL, I guess that's a lot, but holistically speaking, it's not a ton of work, right? If you talk about it. So Walter comes in here and always has good comments. Singletary is a 2-down back that does nothing to fix our biggest problem, being 3rd and 4th and short. Chiefs weren't expecting the run in the first half and adjusted. And yes, that did show. They did adjust. But he's the best we've got right now. So that's probably what we're going to be going with here. And now the Bills can maybe figure out some things with 2 pretty decent running weeks in a row against the Steelers and the Chiefs now yesterday. So now getting to the receivers and the tight ends, Diggs was fed in this game, 10 for 148 and a touchdown. Davis, obviously, with the big play, the huge yards per catch average continues for him. Was it you who made the tweet that was like, oh, he said like 20 something per catch actually lowered his average or something like that?
Yeah. 24 per catch lowered his per catch. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Knox had the game winner. Picked him as our wild card player, and he delivered 3 for 37 in the game winning touchdown. Obviously was praised before and during and after the game for everything he's been battling through, including, goes without saying the off the field loss of his brother on top of the injuries he's been going through. Just an absolute warrior. Took a huge shot on one play down the sideline as well on a big catch that Josh it was a good throw. It was a little high, but Knox was the only guy to catch it. He took a big shot on that, got up, and he was fine. Otherwise, Bills appear to have their true 1A and 1B with Diggs and Davis, and they have that third weapon in Knox. Knox really has a chance here to rebound as we get past the bye week and kind of he gets past these injuries. He's got to be the guy that steps up now. He's got that contract extension. If we can't re-sign Davis because we gave that money to Knox, will we look back at the Knox extension and regret it? Comment section. I want to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so this was probably 6-7 months ago. I might have been on Air Raid Hour. It was on another show maybe, and the same topic came up before the Knox extension. Who would we prefer to re-sign, Diggs or Davis or Knox? My opinion was Davis. The reason for that is I've seen things from Davis. I've seen him do things as a receiver that make my jaw drop, where it's like, whoa, I can't believe that guy just did that, which to me says his talent is off the charts. You go look at the Colts playoff game where he was toe tapping on the sideline. Like, that's a special wide receiver. I've seen really good things from Knox, but I haven't seen that caliber of wow factor, like super talent. And so for me, I always said I'd prefer to have Davis over Knox. Now that we've re-signed Knox, if we cannot re-sign Davis, I think there might be a form of regret there, just because I think he is a special talent. But at the end of the day, I think Knox is good. And I think the Bills could probably find a way to get some more wide receivers in here that do have some talent, especially because I think you're going to have some veteran wide receivers that are going to want to play with Josh Allen. Like, it is good to come play here for a year because of how good he is. At the same time, though, I don't want to lose Gabe Davis. I think the guy's a freak.
Yep. I mean, if you could find a way to give him, Christian Kirk money like that, I think is warranted at this point. I mean, he's very important to this offense. He kind of balances out. Like, we talked in the offseason how the Bills needed some kind of like burner, but in reality, like, Gabe Davis is a deep threat without needing to have 4.4 speed. Like, he's got the size, he's got the stride, he can get past defenders the way the Bills schemed up this offense. And he has a very unique blend of stride and size and hands that, you know, uh, it's not as rare, let's say, as like what Diggs brings to the table or some of these other like alpha type guys. But it is fair to wonder that, like, on as good of an offense the Bills is Gabriel Davis like a top 25 receiver in the NFL? And I don't think it's an unfair question or even opinion to have to say that he could be, right, even as a number 2 on this team. I mean, we talked about good receiving cores in the past. I mean, we think about when, the Falcons had Roddy White and Julio Jones. Like, you made the case that both of those were top 25 guys in the NFL at that time. When the Packers had guys like Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings, those guys are probably both top 25 receivers on the same team. Even in more recent memory, right? You have guys like Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb on the Cowboys together. So, like, it's not unreasonable to say that Gabe Davis is a top 25 receiver in the NFL. Like, I think he's better than some teams' number 1s, and I think he's easily in the top 3 to 5 of number 2s when it comes to teams. So it's going to be interesting. And I think I asked you it might have been the last show or the show before, like, is it too early to start thinking about a Gabe Davis contract extension? But obviously the Bills would need to make that cap number work. So very interesting. Any other positive notes from this game before we get into a couple of the things that we see people talking in the comment section about McKenzie, and we're about to get to that? Any last thoughts on the positives?
Yeah, just one major positive from this as we head into the bye week. And I know that we're only 6 weeks into the season, but that is a third of the way through the season, which is kind of insane to think we're already a third of the way done with the regular season, more so actually. In my opinion, Josh Allen is far and away ahead in the MVP race. Like, no one's close to him right now. So just want to kind of point that out. Like, he has 419 more yards than any other quarterback in the NFL. He has 2 more touchdowns than any other quarterback in the NFL. And the Bills have beaten the Titans, the Ravens, and the Chiefs, the other 3 top division leaders in the AFC. And that includes victories against Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, who are my 2 and 3 in the MVP race. That comes into play at the end of the season. Wins are not a quarterback stat, but the fact that Allen outdueled Mahomes and Jackson already this season, I think at the end of the year, if Allen can maintain this pace or even regress a little bit to his mean, I think that MVP award's his.
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure. Him beating those 2 guys both head to head has to weigh, at least in the minds of the voters. Even as much as we say that wins aren't a quarterback stat, and they aren't, in the minds of voters, like, if all things equal, it could come down to something like that. Randy says, think about Atlanta, for example. How much would they give to pair Davis with London and Pitts? That's a great point, Randy. Before we switch over to some of the negatives from this game, I would ask you all to smash the like for the positives of this game and smash the like for the Bills beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead for the second time in the regular season, 2 seasons in a row. We have almost 200 people watching the show right now. We have over 50 likes at the moment. If we can get this thing up to 100 likes with over 200 people watching, that would be simply amazing. And we appreciate you all. You've been bringing it tonight, loving the fact or fiction responses and loving the takes. Now, sometimes where Bills Mafia does its best work, talking about some of the negatives as we shift our focus there for a little bit. Isaiah McKenzie's first on the topic list here for the negatives. Had the fumble on the pitch in the red zone, the drop touchdown on 4th and goal, which I think the ball was a little behind him. Look, he has had an okay year. He's coming off the concussion, but the comparisons that he was going to be what Cole Beasley was, a lot of people here realized that wasn't going to be the case. Is it time to give Shakir a true shot and move Isaiah McKenzie back to sort of that gadget, jet sweepy type role that he really made a positive impact on this team in the last couple years? And it's not so much a knock on him, but it's more of like, let's play to these guys' strengths, put these guys in their best positions. And Randy says, where Steve, he is coaching his JV basketball team's practice tonight. He will be back next Monday's show. So we appreciate the concern. He is okay. He was on the pregame yesterday. So what's your take on this McKenzie? What's your take on McKenzie yesterday, and what is his role going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said on the pregame show for the Steelers, McKenzie, to me, I think Shakir's the better slot option now, just because of the way Shakir is able to play on an NFL football field. McKenzie is great as a gadget guy. I really just don't think that he has a skill set to be a traditional slot guy like a Cole Beasley was. And again, that's not saying that McKenzie is awful. I don't want to knock him for one really bad game. And yesterday was a really bad game. It's just his career has kind of shown what he is. And I think we know what he is at this point in time. Yesterday, though, was rough. He had 3 drops. I'll say one of them was highly contested. Like he caught the ball and was being tackled to the ground. I don't really blame him too much on that. The other 2, he tripped over his own foot in the end zone. Like, I don't know what that was.
Yep.
That was just really odd. That should have been a touchdown. On the replay, it was very clearly a great ball by Allen. And then there was one where Allen, I think, hit him over the middle and it just went off his hands. As for the fumble, I think there's some debate on whether or not that was supposed to be a pitch to McKenzie. My thing is, I think it was, just because why would McKenzie be playing in that trail position behind Allen if it wasn't a pitch option? So all in all, just he had a rough game. I'd rather see Shakir as the third option as a receiver on the field consistently than McKenzie, but who knows with this regime? They try to make rookies earn it.
They do, and I like this comment from Jack. McKenzie seems to have too many gaffes, unreliable, and I think that's why it drives us a bit crazy, right? Because he's got talent. He's got a lot of talent.
Yes.
But it's just the consistency with him. Like, he'll make some really, really nice plays. He made a couple really nice catches against Miami. He's had really nice moments throughout his Bills career, to be honest, and then he does stuff like that. I don't know whose fault it was on that pitch, but if you're Isaiah McKenzie and you know you're behind the line of scrimmage and you know there's a chance that ball may be coming to you, you need to be looking at your quarterback. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Like the throw in the end zone, I think, was behind him, and then he did trip over. I will give him the benefit of the doubt on that throw. I think that we maybe overreacted a bit on that, but the fumble, that was rough. And this is why, this is an interesting point from John. This is why he hardly makes anything. And this is maybe why he hasn't gotten that big contract from a team yet, and why, he's been sticking around that Bills team, because he feels like this is his best chance to make an impact, which it very well may be. Fact or fiction? And Isaiah McKenzie will end the year as the go-to slot receiver.
I mean, I think it's fiction. I think one way or another, the Bills are going to have a different, let's say, wide receiver 3, whether that's Shakir or somebody else, I guess remains to be seen. But I don't think McKenzie is the third option or the slot guy by the end of the year.
And I agree with this from Pat. McKenzie, yeah, he didn't really dive on it. He tried to scoop it. They always tell you to just dive on it. So I get that. Another fact or fiction related to this third wide receiver on the Bills. Fact or fiction, the lack of a clearly defined third option, at least as of now, will lead to the Bills signing Odell Beckham Jr.
That it's a fact to me. I'm actually fairly confident OBJ signing. My main reason for that is I've heard Josh Allen talk about him. I've heard Von Miller talk about him. I've heard Stefon Diggs, and I've also heard Jordan Poyer. That's 4 of the Bills captains have talked about actively recruiting OBJ and actively having conversations with him. Von Miller went as far as, I think, to say we already know where he's going, implying that is Buffalo. I think the Bills look at OBJ as kind of the final, maybe the final piece of the puzzle, or the thing that puts them over the top, where it's like, how are you going to beat this team? And if they bring in OBJ, like, you just imagine 3 wide receivers on the field and OBJ, Gabe Davis, and Stefon Diggs. Like, you reach a point where you can't defend this team. You already can't defend this team, but I don't know what you do if you have those 3 guys.
Yeah, I think a lot will depend on sort of what Shakir's impact is over the next, 4 games, let's say. I mean, it's been reported that OBJ is not going to be ready till like mid-November. The Bills obviously on a bye week upcoming, but I think as you start to see them head into the middle of November, maybe start getting towards that Thanksgiving game, if Odell has not re-signed with the Rams, which it sounds like by all accounts it's probably going to be down to the Rams and another team, which very well could be the Bills. that would be a nice time to figure this out. Now, what I will say about this is the Bills' schedule in the second half, certainly on paper, seems to be easier than the first half schedule. So I'm not sure how much that may sway their decision. But if you're signing Odell Beckham, it's for the playoffs, right? Ultimately, like you're signing him to go on a Super Bowl run. And that's really why. So some mixed answers here in the comment section. A lot of people in favor of OBJ, a lot of people saying no. Polarizing type guy, but like there's no doubt the talent. So I guess we'll find out in a couple short weeks. The second half run game, all the positives that we saw in the first half and last week kind of went away. I think that was a change that the Chiefs made defensively. I'm not necessarily too worried about that. My biggest issue really around the run game continues to be short yardage, right? And I feel like the Bills, they're almost like just kind of trying to throw things at the wall and see what works in short yardage. They finally seem to find something on really short yardage where Josh was just sneaking and they were having Gabe Davis push him from behind. That seems to be their best play on like 1 yard or less. But for as dynamic as this team is on offense and as good as they are on offense, there's still a bit of this bugaboo in short yardage that they have. So I'll still say that it's a bit of a negative, the short yardage situation. Where do you come out on this whole the Bills struggling on short yardage? What would you like to see more of?
Yeah, I don't really know. Like, I don't really know the solution to it or what people particularly want, right? Like I've seen a lot of people kind of rag on Devin Singletary as not being the guy that can get us those short yards. My question then is who are we going to get? Like if you're going to go get Christian McCaffrey, he's not a short yardage guy. Like he's not a guy you can just run up the middle and he's going to truck somebody and get 3 yards. He's more of that finesse back. So I look at players like that and I'm like, I don't really think there's a guy out there the Bills can bring in that's a thumper at the running back position. With that in mind, I watched the Eagles game last night. They're kind of ridiculous about the short yardage thing. They line Jalen Hurts up under center, and everyone and their mother knows they're going to QB sneak it, and they're just so talented on that interior of their offensive line. They get it every time. Josh Allen is a dominant force. QB sneak. Just QB sneak it. If it's 3rd and 1, QB sneak it. If you do that twice, you're going to get it once with Josh Allen. That's the way at least I look at those super short yardages when you absolutely need them. Otherwise, I don't want Allen in harm's way.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, I mean, you saw Hurts yesterday, like you mentioned, going low, guys jumping over the pile. His legs just keep like Josh can do that. I mean, even in the situation where the Chiefs knew it was coming and they clogged up the middle, like he still got that first down fairly easily. So I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't know the history of like QB sneaks and like the rate of injury, but it certainly seems like it's a fairly safe play. Like if you go low and you're kind of just under the pile and just head first, like I don't know. They got to figure something out because every time like the Bills came up short on like a second down and it was like, oh, they got 9 yards there, but now it's 3rd and 1. Like it definitely gave me anxiety.
Yes.
So we'll we'll see if that anything changes from that out of the bye week. One of the negatives really from this game that kind of, Steve pointed out in the notes and really hadn't been a negative at all until this game was some of the tackling, right? Some missed tackling, some not wrapping up. Milano had an interesting kind of play on the sideline early. Obviously, the missed tackles on Juju where he got the touchdown. Saran Neal being used on defense, which I'm sure there was some very detailed thought process behind that, but like, did the Bills overthink this? Were they pressing a little too much on defense? And what's your take on the overall tackling and sort of plan that you saw from the Bills defense this game? Were they pressing and were they overthinking?
So the Neal thing is interesting to me, right? Like it seemed to be a very very one-sided argument, at least on Twitter, where people were like, get Saran Neal off the field. And I actually was okay with it when they went to the spy with Matt Milano. So you put Saran Neal on Travis Kelce and you just tell Saran Neal, beat the absolute snot out of him. We don't care if there's a penalty. We don't care really if he catches the ball for 6, 7, 8 yards. Just keep beating up on him the entire game. we need Matt Milano to spy Mahomes because otherwise Mahomes is going to beat us with his legs. So when the Bills kind of went to that 3-2-6 where Teron Neal was in that role, that's when I was fine with it. When I wasn't was when Teron Neal was on the field and Matt Milano was not. That was ridiculous. Do not take Milano off the field. As for the tackling, yeah, the Juju, I think it was Juju Smith-Schuster, right? The one where there's 3 guys on top of him and he just runs away from them after none of them could tackle him. That just goes with this consistent thing I've seen with the Bills this year, which is frustrating and concerning for me. They seem to make some big mistakes every single game. They've been able to overcome it in 5 of the games just because they're so ridiculously talented. But you have these weird little mistakes, like that pitch to McKenzie was a weird little mistake. Those 3 players missing a tackle on Juju Smith-Schuster was a weird little mistake. The fact that the Bills could still beat the Chiefs with all those weird little mistakes is kind of a positive to me because I have to presume they will clean that up at some point in time. And what better time to clean it up than the bye week?
Yeah, and honestly, outside of this game too, they've been pretty good tackling all year, this team. And that's something that like has frustrated us even with some of these good Bills teams and these good Bills defenses over the last couple of years is like there's still been some spots here and there with lapses in tackling that have driven us nuts. And really up until this game, that hadn't been an issue this year. Yeah, we've been up a couple 3rd and longs, but it's going to happen. But this will get cleaned up, I think, over the bye. I think the Bills did settle down anyway in the second half, so we did see some improvement from the first half to the second. Speaking from the first half to the second, at 12 seconds at the end of the first half, the Chiefs go down, get that 62-yard field goal into the wind to tie the game at the half with only 12 seconds. Obviously, everyone on social media was calling back to the playoff game from a year ago. So is this a case of not learning from last year, or was this another kind of fluke situation here?
So during the playoffs, everyone said they wanted the Bills to squib it, which, by the way, maybe this is controversial. I did not. I was happy they kicked it out of bounds, which people might disagree with. But the Bills squibbed it here. The Chiefs still got in quote-unquote field goal range, not even really in field goal range. And they kicked a 62-yard field goal, I believe, into the wind.
Into the wind, yep.
And it was a kick that could have been made from 70. Like, he absolutely destroyed that ball.
Drilled it.
I looked at it. I'm just like, okay, this is annoying. But people were blasting Frazier and McDermott. And I was like, this is just a ridiculous kick. Like, if he kicks that 20 times, he probably misses it 19 or 18 times. Like, I got to tip my hat there. Like, that's all I have to do. It sucks because it does remind me of the playoff game. But at the end of the day, the Bills got the last laugh here. So it doesn't really hurt that bad.
And this is the thing. The one thing that drives me nuts is like, oh, they should have squibbed it. They should have squibbed it. Like, yes, it takes a few seconds off the clock, but when you squib it like that team's starting on like the 30, 35 yard line. Like, exactly. If you're going to try to kick the ball and take some time off the clock, you need to like almost coffin corner kickoff, right? Like McManus did earlier in the game tonight against the Chargers. Like, you need to kick it in the corner to where they have to field it outside the end zone and make them take it up the sideline or towards the middle of the field, take four or so seconds off the clock and still tackle them at the 25 or inside the 25. Mm-hmm. That's what you do in that situation. You don't necessarily, and again, I'm not the coach, that's their call. I don't like the idea of squibbing it and giving them the automatic ball at the 35. Like, to me, that's not what I would have done. I would have, to your point, if you're going to do that, I'd rather kick it out of the end zone, put him back 10 more yards, and okay, 4 seconds, that's maybe one play. So that's me. That's just my philosophy. But any other negatives we share before we get to our fun, one of our fun segments that we haven't done in a while, the Jabroni of the Week? Any other negatives before we get to the Jabroni of the Week?
I think we covered them all. I'll say I do think a few people, like I kind of alluded to just before, like wanted to make it a negative what Leslie Frazier did or what Sean McDermott did. I think they coached a hell of a game, both of them. And people always like to pile on Sean McDermott when, things go poorly, but a little bit of credit here for Sean McDermott and especially Leslie Frazier coming out of the half and kind of changing their schemes and their ideas. And that 3-2-6 was genius. It was absolutely genius. It changed the game. And that's coaching. That's not players like doing things. The coaches change the plays, change the personnel. So a little bit of kudos there. So I guess it's not a negative to me. It might be to some people, but I thought they coached a hell of a game.
Oh yeah, I agree. All right, we're an hour in and we're doing great on time. We're gonna get to our jabroni of the week now, and this has been a popular segment for us for some time. We haven't done it in a while, and Hansel, I don't know that you may not have ever done this segment for us, but this is our jabroni of the week, where we essentially say who made a stupid comment, who did something stupid this week. We have a lot of choices, and then I purposely haven't talked about one of the things as a negative from this game because we are going to get to it here in a second.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds. Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away. And The Rock means 3 seconds away from The Rock to lay the smack down on your candy ass.
I gotta stop you though. You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
So I'm not sure if you've seen that clip before, but our jabroni of the week, and I gotta tell you, man, I mean, Steve put it very well in the show notes. The national pundits, obviously the Bills social media intern probably got a slap on the wrist for that cowherd clip he put out this week. But I have to say, the jabroni of the week this week was Brad Allen and that officiating crew for me. I mean, the back-to-back plays of the tripping from Chris Jones where they didn't call it, and then the block in the back on the punt. And by the way, not only that, to add to that, the Chiefs official social media Twitter handle today put out a video saying CEO of sacks and showed the Chris Jones sack on Josh Allen sack where he tripped him. So all of you that have been that whole Chris Jones play and that whole sequence, the officiating to the Chiefs, putting that on social media, like easily my jabronis of the week. And the Bills won in spite of that officiating crew. You can say whatever you want. There were some really bad calls in that game. I know the Bills got a call or two, but it was really bad. The holdings that weren't being called, the block in the back, the trip that Chris Jones had on Josh Allen, and yet somehow the Bills find a way to battle through adversity and win the game in spite of that. My fear is that that's how that game is going to be officiated every time the Bills play the Chiefs, regardless of the officiating crew that it is. We seem to get a crappy one for some reason every time we play them. But I have this just pit in my stomach that every time we play the Chiefs, that type of shit's going to happen. And man, it's going to be a struggle for me. So that's my jabroni of the week. What is your jabroni of the week?
Yeah, so my jabroni of the week, and I actually tweeted this out right before I left service for 48 hours, came back, and my phone almost exploded with all the notifications. My jabroni of the week is Skip Bayles. Absolutely nonsensical take from Skip Bayles that I heard. I don't listen to Skip Bayles. I don't watch Skip Bayles. I was driving. I switched over to whatever sports channel he was on. And the first thing I heard him say is that Josh Allen has never done anything in a game against Patrick Mahomes in pressure situations. And he kept talking about it over and over again. Like he just didn't do enough. He didn't do anything. And Shannon Sharp actually jumped on him. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like Skip Bayles, honestly, he apparently watched that game against the Bills and the Chiefs where Josh Allen took the lead three separate times in the fourth quarter. And he has the audacity to tell me that Josh Allen didn't do enough to win that close game. Like, absolute jabroni, and I'm so happy that Josh Allen is the one that drove down the field, hurdled over a man, and then threw an absolute dime to Dawson Knox to take the lead, followed by Patrick Mahomes throwing a pretty bad interception and the Chiefs losing.
Yeah, sweet justice there at the end, in spite of the officiating. A lot of national pundits not actually taking their L's today. They're doubling down or just ignoring what they said. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see that even the Bills' social media staff can be petty, and they have one of the best. They have one of the best around. So I gotta hand it to the Bills' social media staff. Really nice, and that video will live forever because it's on the internet and doesn't go away. So before we wrap up tonight with our final thoughts, I encourage you all to go over to cover1.net and sign up for Cover One Pass. It's only $57 for the season. You get a shirt, you get swag, you get access to the Slack channel, you get access to exclusive videos, film room clips from Kendall and Pro Ant and Eric doing a really good job breaking down what, a lot of Bills Mafia is super knowledgeable, and a lot of these takes that you guys have can be validated by some of these things these guys are putting out in the film work. And also, if there's something you're not sure of and you're wondering about it, like that's why we have the Slack channel. So guys like Eric can tell you like what's happening on film and kind of tell you what these assignments are. We really appreciate all of you who have signed up for One Pass already. And we really appreciate all of you tonight who have joined us on the show. We have over 200 people watching tonight. That's really awesome. Give yourselves a pat on the back. The comments coming in tonight have been awesome. So Hansel, what are your parting thoughts, your closing thoughts for tonight as we wrap up and start to head into this bye week?
Yeah, just I think it's a massive win. I don't think we should undersell or oversell it. It is a regular season game, but nonetheless, it's a game against probably our biggest competition for the 1 seed in the AFC. Bills 5-1 going into the bye. I would have signed up for that before week 1, and now they get to see Green Bay at home, where the Packers have never beaten the Bills, against Aaron Rodgers. And Trey White might be walking onto the field to start that game. That's going to be absolutely electric. And I'm just ready for the Bills to go on a run to kind of end the season and solidify home field advantage for the entire playoffs.
Yeah, really interesting. When the schedule came out, thought the second half of the schedule set up really well for the Bills. There's some surprise teams in there, obviously, like the Vikings are 5-1, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. The Jets have been playing well. We haven't played them yet. But there's also some other teams in there that really haven't looked that great. The Lions, I've put up points, but still haven't been winning games. The Bears look abysmal. The Bengals, I know they just beat the Saints in New Orleans, but they look quite beatable. And this Packers team, who we're about to play coming out of the bye, is really down right now. So that looks like, not going to say it's a win, but guaranteed. But that looks like maybe a more winnable game or a little bit of a easier matchup than maybe we could have predicted. So for the Bills to be 5-1 right now, heading to the bye, I would have signed up for that right when the season started, right when the schedule came out. I thought 4-2 would have been great as well. So 5-1 heading to this bye, get these guys healthy and get ourselves ready for that Packers game. So with that, we will wrap up tonight's show. Really thank everyone again tonight for joining in the comment section. Let's see what happens in the rest of this Chargers Broncos game. It is tied up at 13 right now. The Broncos holding their own and playing well tonight. Russell Wilson playing decent, and we'll see what happens. We will be back here Monday night. We will not be doing a Sunday pregame show, obviously, because there's no pregame. So we will be back here for our Monday night show a week from today, and we will be doing a little bit of a around the NFL and around the AFC, a little bit expanding on what Hansel and I talked about on our last Monday show, as we kind of take stock of the AFC East and the AFC landscape in general. And we will be back with you all a week from tonight. So with that said, for myself and Hansel, we will see you all next time, and go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?